Okay, I hope that everyone, Johan, you can see the screen? Is it fine?
Yes, it looks perfect.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone from Switzerland. Dear members of the Kenya National Advisory Board for Impact Investing Task Force, the Global Steering Group NAB colleagues, and members of the global and African impact investing movements. Welcome to the 18th event of our Impact Investor Circle Geneva Zug series, which was launched in the fall of 2020 under the theme Improving Access to Capital for Small Growth-Oriented Businesses in Africa, searching for long-term capital which these businesses need for growth, especially for impact enterprises that are small or just starting out. There's an urgent need to scale up the supply of impact capital to meet the demand for impact capital. Despite the recent growth of the impact investing sector, there's still a huge financing gap for the SDGs in Kenya, the size of which I hope that one of our speakers can tell us about today, especially when it comes to the financing gap to meet the needs of the SMEs. During the first 8 episodes of this Impact Investor Circle series, whose concepts originated from the Impact Investing Exchange in Singapore, IX, we covered the most important stakeholders within the Zambian impact investing ecosystem with a particular focus on the market enablers and the suppliers of impact capital. Then in the last quarter of 2021, we launched the second series, which focused on the impact investment ecosystem in Tanzania, which today is represented by the NAB task force led by Dr. Nema Robert, which according to their concept note is focusing on legitimizing the field, mapping the ecosystem, policy development, engagement, and of course the development of the Tanzanian impact investing ecosystem. The global steering group today covers more than 35 countries through its 30 plus national and regional advisory boards working to catalyze impact investment in their markets. Currently, only 4 African countries are part of the global steering group movement, including in addition to Zambia and Ghana, which joined the same year, Africa's largest and second largest economies, Nigeria and South Africa. Today we are launching our 5th series by focusing on Kenya, which when officially founded and joining the global steering group will become only the 5th African National Advisory Board for Impact Investing. However, I have been informed by the Global Steering Group Africa coordinator, Mrs. Atieno Otonglo, that another 10 task forces are in the process of joining the global impact investing movement on the African continent. This means that there will now be 2 NABs in the East Africa Economic Community once Kenya and Tanzania has joined, or there will be 5 NABs within the tripartite free trade area once Kenya, Tanzania, and Ethiopia join South Africa and Zambia. And I make reference to this region integration because the protocol on investment to the agreement establishing the African Continental Free Trade Agreement draft was concluded in October last year and adopted at the ministerial level by the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement Council of Ministers. Unfortunately, the 70 pages long protocol, Chapter 3, doesn't mention impact investment, although it does talk about fostering stakeholder engagement, better and more consistent social, human rights, and environmental impact assessment to promote the wide sharing of benefits and long-term viability of investment projects. So perhaps something that the African NABs could look into in expanding your policy engagement from the national level to also the regional and continental levels. So we are very excited about presenting Kenya today because, as you know, Kenya continues to be the most attractive destination in East Africa for impact investors. According to the now rather old 2015 study by the GIN, at least 136 impact capital vehicles are active in Kenya, managed by 95 private impact investors, excluding the DFIs. This figure is most likely to have increased since 2015, and I hope that our speakers from the Kenyan NAB task force can elucidate us on the latest figures. As per a KPMG survey on the deal activity in the East African region, 75% of investors investing in Kenya mentioned that their source of funding originates from international investors based in Europe and North America. This includes DFIs, high net worth individuals, family offices, insurance companies, and asset managers, which is the audience that this series mainly is targeting, in the hope that the speakers today, through their intervention, can help you better understand and eventually overcome some of the main barriers hindering the increased flow of impact capital into the Kenyan market. So 4P Group and the Swiss Impact Investing Associations are proud to host today's interactive Impact Investor Circle webinar featuring board members of the Kenyan National Advisory Board for Impact Investing Taskforce, who are all leading practitioners within Kenya's impact investing ecosystem, as well as the contributions of other impact investing ecosystem players. So the agenda is structured as follows. After my introduction, my colleague, Mrs. Svetlana Banerjee, member of the board of the Swiss Impact Investing Association, will briefly present the vision and the role of SIA within the Swiss impact investing ecosystem. And then Mr. Peter Chintu will briefly share some lessons learned from the NABII Zambia of more than 3 years of not only promoting awareness about impact investing in Zambia, but also achieving some real tangible results, such as an inclusion of impact investing in the 8th five-year national development plan of the Zambian government. And he will be followed by Mr. Johan Franzen, the founder of Entnest, which is a new digital infrastructure for trusted local and global entrepreneurship ecosystem, which we hope could become the home of Africa's impact revolution if adopted by the African NABIIs. And finally, Mr. Arif Neky will present a few overarching elements of Kenya's National Advisory Board Taskforce strategic plan and some key achievements in Kenya since the process began 4 years ago. And after this introduction, we move to the core part of the program, where another member of the Kenyan Task Force, Mrs. Karnika Yadav from Intellecap, will present some recent trends of the impact investing ecosystem. She will be followed by one of the pioneers and heroes of the ESG and impact investing ecosystem, Mr. Paul Clements-Hunt. And he will then be followed by one of the members of the supply of impact capital of the ecosystem, Mr. Musembi from OikoCredit. And finally, Mr. Raymond Obara will share with you some key takeaways from SANCAL Africa Forum, which was held in Nairobi just less than 2 weeks ago, which is one of the most important impact or investment conferences on the African continent. And the whole event will end by a few concluding remarks by myself. This is a live session. It's being recorded and will be uploaded both on 4P Groups and Swiss Impact Investing Association's YouTube channels before the end of this week, and shared with all prospective and actual impact investors investing in the East Africa Economic Community and Kenya in particular, in the hope that you will, through your investment, will assist financially and technically Kenya's impact enterprises scale their solution for those prioritized sustainable development goals, which we have incorporated into their business operations. So thank you to all of you attending this event in real time, and to those of you who are listening to the video subsequently. Let me quickly present the house rule. Please turn off your microphones whenever you're not speaking throughout the entire event. And during the Q&A, remember to introduce yourself and your name and your affiliation, and keep the questions short. And please do feel free to use the chat box to introduce yourself and raise pertinent questions, which we will seek to answer during the Q&A session. And for those of you who have not already created an account on the Entnest platform, please do so, which will allow us to continue to engage with you after the end of this event. So with these words, I will hand over to my colleague, Svetlana. Over to you, Svetlana, if you're there. I can't see if she's currently in Dubai, so I don't know if there's okay. I can't see if she's there. Maybe she'll come in afterwards. Then perhaps while we wait for Svetlana, Peter Chintu, are you there? Don't see if Peter's there. Okay, can't see if he's there, but Peter, if you're there, you can come in. Let me know when you're there. Maybe then we just start with you, Johan. 5 minutes, please.
All right, excellent. So thank you. It's great to be here, and I really appreciate all the work that Christian is doing here, both for Kenya, for the broader African community, and also for the Impact Investment Group, both in Switzerland, but also way beyond that. So thank you for being here. I'm the founder of Entnest, and I'm not going to talk about the features and functions, of course, here, but rather about the overall intent and vision and mission of Entnest. And I think the world right now, we are all quite overwhelmed by the many different platforms and so on. There's so many different communities, and it rather creates fragmentation and duplication. And the intent of Entnest is rather to try and create synergies through connecting and more interacting between networks of trusted networks. So the fundamental elements of Entnest, it really starts with having an invitation from somebody who's already on the inside. So it's invite only. But as you can see, it is possible to participate in videos, webinars, and so on here without having a profile in Entnest. But there are big benefits of course, setting up your own personal profile or your organizational profile through Entnest. Then we would be able to continue. We could have interacted before the event. We can, of course, interact during the event, but even more importantly, we can interact also after the event is over. So invite only productivity by combining a lot of different tools in a bigger toolbox. Very important today for sure. And the third point, as I mentioned, creating synergies instead of fragmentation and duplication. So we're looking to work closer with the different NABs, for instance, like what Christian has introduced us to here now. I am also in discussions on an overall level there, and we believe that by setting up the different NABs inside of Entnest, you have an opportunity then of keeping your network highly productive, but also being able to very easily connect and interact with the other NABs. And not only that, but even beyond all the different other NABs. So trusted networks of networks in one place here. I'm highly appreciating Christian and the work, of course. So I'm also committing to providing further benefits and value to all the people and organizations coming in through Christian's big efforts of getting us up and running together here. It's all about creating the trust that I think is so elusive in the digital space today. um, we're all more or less scammed, spammed, hacked, and so on. And we need to create that digital trust. And that's why Entnest is like a restart of a combination of Zoom, Slack, Meetup, Eventbrite, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, and so on. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say at this point in time. And I think, unless you have any other comments, Christian, I'm handing it back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Johan. May I just please ask everyone to turn off the microphone when you're not speaking, because it's disturbing the recording. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
I have not my two colleagues from the board of they are in Dubai, so I don't know, they have something is holding them up. So in interest of time, I think we'll move on to the next speaker, which is Mr. Arif Neky, who is leading the UN Strategic Partnership, and he's also the leader of the Kenyan National Advisory Board Taskforce. So, Mr. Neky, please, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christian and Johan. Thank you for your interesting introduction as well. This is to send you greetings from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm happy to be here, and looking forward to the dialogue. So as Christian mentioned, I've had the privilege of being the senior advisor for UN strategic partnerships in one of the largest footprints of the UN in the South. 24 funds, agencies, and programs, 2 global head offices within which I've created an SDG partnership platform. And the focus has been to unlock SDG partnerships, financing, and investments, full stop. So very focused. And that's what we need essentially in this context. So I'll just give you a bit of background on the context and what we're doing now is with respect to Kenya. So, Kenya is ranked as a low middle income country, which much of Africa has a very youthful population. I think our average age in the continent is 19. This is the future market, frankly, for the world. And with its growing economy, it serves as a regional hub for finance and impact investing in East Africa. And as Christian mentioned, there's over 136 impact capital vehicles active. One thing to remember, though, is you hear narratives in countries like Kenya that sometimes are quite diametrically opposite. So you'll hear about Kenya being very tech-savvy, very entrepreneurial, very capitalistic, the Geneva of the banking system in East Africa, etc., etc. All these wonderful narratives, very can-do entrepreneurs, the Silicon Savannah, as we like to call ourselves. However, it's also having GDP growth. Is so important for us. So we have been, following the Secretary General's call to shift from SDG funding to financing in emerging middle-income countries, where ODA shrinks, bilaterals are cutting their aid programs and shifting towards trade. Oftentimes, their ministries are also coupled up now between development and trade. And so what you're looking at is, public funds being your second recourse, which are essentially severely constrained with debt service. So really the discretionary spending for SDGs is very little, despite very huge aspirations and targets to reach SDGs within the next 8 years. So what that leaves us with is really to try and work as a magnet, to try and influence private capital flows simultaneously with the public and development flows, to ensure that this helps us meet our SDG targets. As an illustration, let me give you an example. So, for example, for 6 decades since independence, we've relied on what I call sweetheart grants. The bilateral grants that came in, 80% of NGOs, foundations, essentially directly or indirectly relying on grants. That is shifting tremendously. And I know India, South Africa, many countries have been through this. What we have, for example, is the entire UN system raising approximately 450 million a year and spending it. Simple model, money in, money out, member states supporting primarily. Now, if you look at the public budgets, at 30 billion a year compared to the 450 million. So really, it's a minuscule percentage, and it's not going to be a game changer in and of itself. But that 30 billion of public funds are also severely constrained by debt service. We're at the red alert levels of debt service. So what that means is one needs to look at the market. When you look at private sector flows in the market, that's 90 billion. So that gives you the sense of why it's so important to influence the direction and flow of private capital in countries like Kenya, because you want to be a magnet to influence these flows into investable projects and projects that create that social impact with the economic impact. So help private sector create wealth, but simultaneously create the impacts we're looking for our SDGs. And to do that, we're essentially talking about shared value. We're talking about profit with purpose. We're talking about triple bottom line, whichever cliche appeals to you. But essentially, the idea is to influence these flows. So in Kenya, what we've done is, I won't talk about figures because my colleague Karnika Yadav, who's from Intellecap, who's a member of the NABII Taskforce in Kenya, will speak about some of those numbers. But essentially, over the last few years, I have had the pleasure of being the chair of the Taskforce for the Kenya NABII, and we've brought together a different approach. We've brought in essentially I think Johan used the expression, the trusted network of networks. So we're aggregating financing networks. So for example, our members include some of the most important financing networks in Kenya. We've got the Bankers Association. We've got the East Africa Private Equity and Venture Capital Association. We've got the East Africa Philanthropy Network, which I had co-founded 22 years ago with 300 foundations. We've got the Social Enterprise Society of Kenya. We've co-created a finance, investment, and trade network with about 60 council members from a multiplicity of stakeholders, government, private sector, development partners. Think of it as a scanning investment. Kenya at 60, like the Dubai model to unlock FDI, and what I've been running, which is the SDG Partnership Platform. We've also got the Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs, ANDI, that some of you may quite well know. We've co-created the Africa Venture Philanthropy Alliance, linked to the European and Asian alliances that, as you know, are very powerful vectors with their own deal share platforms. We've got the UN Global Compact. We've got the UN SDG Partnership Platform. And then we've got some key members who've been supporting us through the Open Capital, through Intellecap, through Convergence, through the Stockbrokers Association of Kenya, the Association of Startups and SME Enablers of Kenya, pensions, cooperatives. We're discussing IFI, DFI partners and angel investors. So essentially bringing the fruit basket of blended finance partners and associations together. And one of the things that we need to get beyond is this constant issue of fragmentation. And oftentimes fragmentation is caused by branding. So I've got my brand and I want to do my thing, and you've got your brand and you want to do your things, and we're chasing after financiers and donors for the same purpose. What we need to do is, as I say, go beyond our egos, logos, and silos and converge for impact. That's where we need. No one has a silver bullet, or no single organization can do it alone, given the trillions of dollars required as a gap in SDGs. So given that approach, what we did is work, first of all, with Government of Kenya and support them in establishing the Integrated National Financing Framework, which is tracking public and private sector flows. The INFF, many of you might be familiar with that, and it's being supported by the UN. It's completed a development finance assessment. We know that when we talk about financing development outcomes, it's really about leveraging sources of finance, influencing budget allocations, and helping to shift funding priorities of investment decisions of donors, governments, and private sector actors to align to the SDGs. And as you all probably know, that there's 7 key action items to initiate the systemic changes in public and private finance to achieve the SDGs. And these are the SDG budgeting approaches, the SDG-aligned fiscal and debt instruments, leveraging international public finance for the SDGs, unlocking private finance for the SDGs, and I think that's where this group is particularly important, and aligning business strategies and operations for the SDGs. And finally, very critical, what you can't measure, you will not achieve. So impact measurement and SDG finance reporting, very critical in terms of showing some level of attribution or at least contribution in what we all are doing. So as we try and support these approaches, the unlocking of private finance has been extremely important for us. And what we've done is developed a clear strategy over the next 4 years, looking at people and peace and planet and prosperity as strategic priorities, within which there's a cluster of areas: climate action, food systems, resilience, drought, etc., fall into the planet and prosperity. People and peace is about human dignity, education, health, transformative governance, and the like. And a number of things are already happening. Whilst we wait to establish ourselves officially, we have a number of interesting initiatives happening. For example, we've got the world's first, we like to think, development impact bond for adolescent sexual reproductive health, which supports 500,000 girls in 300 facilities in 10 sub-national counties in Kenya. And it has an investor window for a return, and it has an outcome funder window, which is grants based on performance and payment only based on performance. So these types of innovative financing instruments and other outcome funds that are being developed, diaspora funds, resilience funds, and the like, are some of the things that are already happening at the moment. So what I like to say is that we're looking forward to joining the NAB family. We are a task force, but the train has left the station. We're already cutting deals. Things are happening, and very exciting work is happening across all of the members. And why did we think about an association of associations? It's because we needed to amplify the work of these associations. Each might have 100, 200, 300 members.
I think we
Yeah,
lost Neky a little bit there, but
he was just getting ready
very,
to sing.
very,
Nick,
yeah.
let us just give him a. I've just been in Nairobi in January, so I know that even though the internet was a bit better than in Addis.
Coordinating the efforts. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
we
got
just
you back.
lost the last 30 seconds where you
Yeah.
talked about
Okay.
amplifying the work of the associations. If you can resume from there, please.
Sure. Sure. Thank you. So essentially, our core objectives are number one, mainstreaming impact investment across Kenya. How do you popularize the impact revolution, let's call it, across all sectors and across society? Number two, becoming a national collaboration platform for impact investment ecosystem players to address sector-wide issues and complementary efforts for all stakeholders. Strengthening the enabling environment around advocacy, fiscal, regulatory, legal policies that allow us to bring in more private capital more efficiently and create public-private collaborations as well. Some under the PPP Act and others that might be outside the PPP Act but still remain public-private collaborations and co-funding opportunities. Chaperoning, curating, and facilitating efforts of impact investment ecosystem players across the 5 pillars of impact investment, talking about supply of impact capital, demand, intermediation, policy and advocacy, and market building, so that we realize significant economic, social, and environmental benefits. And creating a fully fledged structure, a new board, a set of task teams that will focus on 3 key areas. So we're at the stage that is very exciting. We have the associations coming together, subscribing to create a legal entity in Kenya called Impact Investing Kenya. And this legal entity will be establishing a brand new board, a brand new set of governance structures, a brand new secretariat, and then engaging with government and other sectors and agencies to drive this mission forward. But for now, we have task teams around the supply of private capital, which includes pooled funds. We have, for example, unclaimed financial assets, other kinds of pooled funds that can be deployed much more effectively. Looking at the demand task team, looking at how we can really look at impactful pipelines that create scale and systems influence and sustainable impacts, and not little pilots and what I call puffs of excellence in a sea of deprivation that puff out as soon as the funding runs out. Really, we're thinking about longer term sustainability. And finally, the enabling environment task team. And that group is also going to be looking at mainstreaming impact advocacy. We look forward to working with all of you. We have developed very strong links with a number of global partners as well, including partners in Switzerland. The ambassador of Switzerland has been a real champion with us as well. We've engaged with the SDG Lab, with Building Bridges, with Sustainable Finance, Swiss, etc. And meeting Christian has also been a pleasure because we've invited him to speak to one of our events, and that's been great. So I think without taking more of your time, I just want to tell you that we're very excited to join this community, to create Impact Investing Kenya, and also to help in the regional context other NABs that I'm sure will appear in the East African community region. So thank you, and look forward to keeping in touch.
Yes, thank you so much, Arif. It was really exciting to hear about all of these amazing initiatives that you are planning to launch and that you have already started. So thank you so much for sharing that with our community. So without any further ado, I will move on to the core part of the program. And the first speaker is another member of the task force of the NABII in Kenya, Mrs. Karnika Yadav from Intellecap, which is also organizing the famous Sandkalp Summit in Nairobi. So Karnika, over to you. And let me know if you have any slides you want to share. You can, Johan can guide you on how to do that if you want to do that.
Yeah, no, I don't have any slides. So I don't want to bore you all guys with the slides. I'll be just sharing some information and insights about the impact investment landscape in Kenya. My experience of working in this ecosystem for about last 10 years or so. So that's what I intend to do. But before I get into particularly into the impact investment ecosystem in Kenya, just for the context and for the understanding where I or the organization comes from, I'll just take a minute or two to explain about it. So we, Intellecap, we are a part of a group called as Avishkar Group. We believe we are one of the biggest impact investing platform across the global south, based in the global south. So we work across Asia and Africa as a part of our impact investing platform. We work through three pillars, which is capital, knowledge, and networking. As a part of the capital, we were the pioneers in launching the impact investment funds, and as of now, and we are the GPs or the fund managers, and as a part of that, we have been investing investing over the last 20 years across the global south, and currently manage assets of about more than $1.5 billion impact capital that we manage through other funds that we have. And then the second pillar that we work is on the advisory arm, where we work on building the impact ecosystem across the global south, across the multiple geographies that we work in. And the third is the networking pillar, that is Sankalp. And Sankalp is also one of our key initiatives to develop the ecosystem, impact investing ecosystems across the multiple geographies. So we host these forums. In India, we have just concluded our Africa Summit about a couple of weeks back. We on this weekend, we are hosting the summit in Bangladesh, and then in few months' time, we will be hosting the summit even in Ghana. And the whole purpose, as Arif also mentioned previously, is to bring together the stakeholders, to bring in more collaboration opportunities for the investors, for the DFIs, for the foundations, and everybody and anybody who is working in the impact investment phase, to collaborate with each other and also to learn from each other, so that they are not making the mistakes which have been already made by the previous organizations that came early into this space. So that's the whole intention of also organizing the summit across multiple geographies that we do. While we have one of the speakers, Raymond, who will be speaking about, but just to give a context, we had like over 1,400 participants that just participated in the Sankalp Africa Summit. That also shows the level of interest in impact investment in Kenya, in East Africa, and I'll say broadly across Africa as well. So it's gaining a lot of momentum, and and as mentioned by some of the previous speakers also, that the ODAs are decreasing as more and more countries are either reaching the lower middle income status, and even there is a change in trend of the international donors and the funders, where they are moving from the aid to trade mentality, where they want to deploy the capital more in the form of the investments and not in the form of the aid. While the humanitarian aid will still stay, but the development part of the aid that was there, it's now converting into the trade form. And that actually brings me to the point where into the explaining or sharing some insights on the impact investment landscape into Kenya. And Christian, you mentioned that as per the 2015 study that was done, that there are about 136 impact investment vehicles. We actually, as Intellecap, we also did a study which took a little bit covered the more years, and it's more recent than that study, which is from, we captured the data between 2015 to 2019 in that, and by that time there were actually 200 plus impact investment vehicles just focused in Kenya or based in Kenya. And we also, what we identified, and even I think the trend is still the same, that DFIs are one of the biggest player working in the impact investment space in Kenya. Even if the funds, even if the Ps or the VCs or the impact investment funds that are investing in Kenya, their LPs are also the DFIs. So most of the capital that is coming into East Africa or Kenya, the source of that capital is actually DFI, and that is quite different from West Africa and also from Asia also, which is another emerging economy. Like in Asia, a lot of US based asset managers or even local businesses, local asset managers are investing. Even in West Africa, there are a lot of local asset managers that are investing into the funds as GPs. But in East Africa or in Kenya particularly, a lot of the capital that is coming is still DFI led. So either DFIs are investing directly into the businesses, which was visible, like the last number that we calculated, there was over $3 billion of capital that was invested in Kenya through the DFIs between 2015 to 2019. I think a couple of $1 billion will already been added to this in the last 3-4 years. In addition to that, about $1 billion of capital was also invested in Kenya, East Africa broadly, by these impact investment funds, which include like Ps and the VCs or impact focus or impact intentional funds between 2015 to 2019. And Kenya, as all of us, I don't know if all of us, maybe I should not say as all of us may be aware, but Kenya is like the hub of impact investment for East Africa, or for even, I'll say, for the matter, even for Africa in total. So everybody who is making impact investment in Africa will definitely have one or two businesses that they have invested in Kenya. So Kenya in that context is very, very active in terms of the impact investment and impact investment vehicles that are focused there. The other interesting thing that is happening in Kenya because of the evolvement of the impact investment ecosystem here is that a lot of local corporate foundations are also have started to, I'll say it's very early stage, but they have also started to engage in the impact investment ecosystem. A lot of bank foundations that have now started, they have started their own incubators, accelerators, funds, and now in providing like early stage or seed capital to the businesses in Kenya. So that's a good change to see that while it's still very minuscule compared to the international capital, the DFI capital or the international impact investment capital is there. But in my 10 years of being in Kenya, that's a very, very positive change that I have observed in the last 5 years, that a lot of local banks and corporate foundations are now actively engaging or have started to engage in the local impact investment ecosystem. The other positive change is also that the angel investors have started coming in. When we as an organization, when we came to Africa from Asia, the first thing that we did was to establish an angel investment network. And at that, in 2015, 2016, so about like 7-8 years back. But at that particular point of time, angel investment was a very nascent concept, and even most of the angel investors that were investing or a part of our network were actually internationally based, US based and all. But recently, a lot of local angel investors like Nairobi Angel Business Network, Victoria Angel Business Network, they have come up and they have been able to mobilize and create capacity of the local angel investors, and have been also able to channelize capital into the businesses. So that's again a very interesting trend that is happening. I think maybe I'm already running out of my time, so I'll just say a couple of last things which are on the what more need to be done in terms of building the impact ecosystem in Kenya is that uh, the lot of capital that is going into the impact businesses is still very concentrated. So it's the same businesses that are receiving that capital while the deals are happening. But there was a recent statistics that over 80% of the capital just went to maybe 10% of the businesses, or maybe even less than that. So, which makes the other businesses a capital dearth situation for the other businesses. So, in that regards, the impact investors needs to be more take more risk and then bet on the other businesses, and not just reinvesting into the same businesses. Even our research shown that even the 2019 research was aligned to this numbers, that 70% or 80% of the capital actually went to just 5 to 10% of the businesses. So that's very much needed. The other thing I will also say is that the blending of the capital is further required. In order to build the pipeline of the businesses, there is also a need for better um, investment readiness support, TA support that can be provided to these businesses. And in that regards, the blending of the concessional capital that can be provided by the donors, if it's blended with the commercial capital or the private capital that is available, it can build the pipeline or the deal flow for the investors in a much better way. I think Curtis is also speaking as he's an investor. He'll be able to tell like what is the demand or the pipeline that exists. But again, that there is a need for the blending of the capital so that the pipeline is much more enhanced, and investors are then able to invest into this wide variety of the businesses. Yeah, I think I've already crossed my time much more than that, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, the statistics were so interesting, so I did not dare to intervene because we learned a lot from your short intervention. So thanks a lot, Karnika. That was really, really insightful. So we will move on to our next speaker, which is Mr. Paul Clement. He has such a long and amazing CV that I will not even try to attempt to summarize it. Paul, you can just say maybe a few words about yourself before you start your presentation. So over to you, Paul. Let's see if Paul is there. No. His colleague Michael. You can see Michael is there. Is Paul with us? Michael Maris, who's working with Paul. Don't know if you can unmute yourself just to let us know if Paul has any problem with his connection or. Okay, his colleague Mike can't unmute. Johan, can you help with that? I don't know if you can see the.
Yeah, I'm trying also to unmute him, but it doesn't allow me here right now. So,
Michael, if you can see, there's a kind of menu here.
Yeah.
If you can see my screen, and then it's the bottom to the extreme left. You click on that one. That should unmute you normally.
And you also have an opportunity of changing the setting if you have different speakers or different cameras and so on there with the arrow up on the screen there.
Okay, perhaps.
Yeah.
I don't know if you recommend he goes in and out, and then we move on to Michael. Yeah, okay, Michael, you're unmuted. I can see you unmuted.
Sorry. I'm just trying to get through to Paul. I'm not entirely sure what's happening. But I quit the meeting and I joined again, and then it asked for permission to use my microphone. So that seemed to work. Same.
Okay, maybe Michael, if you want to, we'll go on with the next speaker, and then you can maybe sort out the problem with Paul, and he can come in as our second speaker.
Sure.
Is that fine?
Yeah, Christian, that sounds like a good plan. I think let's do that.
Yeah. Okay. So we move on to Mr. Curtis Musembi from OikoCredit. So Curtis, over to you, please, and welcome.
Thank you, Christian, and good to meet everyone. As mentioned, I'm Curtis Musembi. I'm with OikoCredit. And just to share just a bit about our experience and our journey in Kenya specifically. But as way of introduction, we are a social impact investor based in the Netherlands, but with various regional offices that look after our business in different parts. I'm with the office in Nairobi that looks after East and Southern Africa. And we have been active in this space since 1996 for the East Africa region, but globally, OikoCredit has been there since 1975. So we have gathered a bit of lessons, a bit of experience along the way that we'd like to share as well. And generally for OikoCredit, we invest in three main areas. That is financial inclusion. And financial inclusion for us is everything from fintechs to SME finance to microfinance and even SME banks. We also have our second arm of investing, which is directly in agriculture SMEs, especially the SMEs that have a very direct linkage to smallholder farmers. Because going back to our mission is to improve livelihoods and to improve the lives of low-income people. And we believe by working with small holder farmers that we are able to have the greatest impact. Then we also finance renewable energy projects. And for renewable energy is everything from pay-go solar, commercial and industrial solar, as well as clean cooking. And in those areas, we are able to have quite a bit of impact.
Sorry, Curtis. Someone is looking for his father. I can hear. I don't know if you could turn off the microphone.
Yeah, just 1 second.
You can see that even the next generations are very eager to join the impact investing movement, but today it's too early. I don't know if the microphone, can you turn it off, Johan? I don't know who it's from where. Okay, let's try again, Curtis. Yeah. Okay.
Actually, it's from Curtis behind him. I think he has his son in the room, and that's why it's a little bit difficult to turn his microphone off. But
okay.
I think we'll give him a second, and he'll come back extremely shortly. But this is all extremely interesting. I'm so happy to be here and what you have achieved with bringing these people together, Christian. This is just excellent. So I'm sure there will be a lot of further synergies coming from this.
Yeah, and, I can see that Paul, I think Paul is with us, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Paul, you're there. Great to see you. Maybe while Curtis is sorting out the issue with his son, sorry about that. That is, I guess, when you have online meetings, unlike in-person meetings, you are exposed to these kind of things. So maybe we'll come back to you, Curtis, after Paul's presentation. Maybe you can put your son to bed or give him something to eat to make him happy. So, Paul, over to you, please. And I think you need to unmute yourself, Paul. Can you help me with that, Johan?
Yeah, I'm trying here also, but we can't hear you right now. So, do you have a chance of? I don't know if you hear us. I hope you do. But if you hover over the screen, maybe you have a chance of seeing the mute microphone button and so on there, and maybe you can select in the audio settings. Okay, yeah, then not much I can do. Maybe
Michael, he logged out, and your colleague Michael, he who had the same problem, but he managed to get unmuted by logging back on. So I don't know, Paul, if that might be a solution. Okay. Okay, sorry about the technical problems we have with the speakers and the sound issue, but I hopefully the content of the intervention compensate from this hiccup. So, Curtis, are you back with us?
Yes, I'm back.
Okay, so we'll go back to your presentation, and then Paul will come in afterwards. Go ahead. Sorry about
Sure,
your son. I hope he's fine now.
No, he's okay. I'll just kick on from where I was. And I was explaining about our focus and investment focus on financial inclusion, on agriculture, and on renewable energy. And specifically for Kenya, currently we have deployed around 60 million euros. This 60 million is through equity, which is one of the investment tools that we use. We also have a big chunk of that also as senior debt, and a small portion of that also as junior debt to over 20 plus partners in the three areas that I've mentioned. So for equity, for senior debt, for junior debt, all of them, we just structure depending on what are the needs, the immediate needs of the company. If they need more debt or more equity, we are flexible enough to provide that. And OikoCredit also happens to be evergreen. So we tend to have a longer investment horizon. We are comfortable with anything even from 6 to 10 years, depending on the specific needs of the partner that you are working with. So generally, in Kenya, our experience has been positive. There is obviously a lot of things to track on the macro side, on the effects, on the pricing, on how the market is, how Kenya is viewed internationally, on the ratings and whatnot. But all things considered, this is a market that we've bet big on it. It's one of our top investment destinations for OikoCredit, and for good reason, because you have there's a lot of opportunity. There's a big market. And the partners that we have, they have proven to be resilient, even during the COVID period, for instance. When we had a lot of turbulence, we saw a lot of slowdown in businesses and SMEs. But for OikoCredit, I can actually confirm that a lot of our partners performed really well, even during COVID. And the few that had struggles were able to have discussions and kick on this journey, just continue from where they were and from what they've been doing. So I would highly recommend Kenya as an investment destination of choice in the region. Thank you.
Okay, that was a fantastic recommendation. I mean, that's really the purpose of our event today. So we are very happy that OikoCredit, based in the Netherlands, have had such a positive investment experience in Kenya. But in order to make that happen, you also need intermediaries. And as I said, we have with us Paul Clement-Hunt, who used to work in Geneva in the past, and who's now established in and out Nairobi. I think his organization is in several different countries, including Nairobi. So, Paul, if you would want to share your experience, your Kenya experience, because as I said to the audience, you have such a fantastic long track record that we'll need to narrow it down to your work in Kenya. So, over to you, Paul. Good to see you again. Johan, I can't hear. Johan.
Yeah, I'm trying also. I still cannot hear you either there. So this is always often the issue with technology. Can it be that you have Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Meet or something open on your same device at the same time? Because then that always interferes either with the audio or video or both. So very sorry, we can't hear you. Yeah. Yeah. it's nothing further I can do from my side, I'm afraid, there. So yeah, I'm trying very hard to make this work.
Okay. Paul, we really want to hear you, so we'll
maybe Christian,
yeah.
if he can disconnect. Sometimes there's a problem with the headphones also. Maybe just try to speak directly into the laptop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right now you are on mute, and if you click on that again, yeah.
You're still on mute, Paul. Paul, you're on mute. You managed to unmute yourself just before. Yeah, now you're unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hey.
Fantastic.
Beautiful suggestion.
And thank you for the help.
Thank you for the tech help. Look, I'll jump into it really quickly. And Christian, thank you. I appreciate time short. So, look, I'm going to take a few minutes to tell you a Kenyan, African, absolute success story, but there is a sting in the tail. So the Blended Capital Group, we operate in Nairobi, we operate in Geneva, Australia, and the UK. I spend my time flipping between the two. So this story is happening right now. As of now, we've taken a business model that was baked in Kisumu, Western Kenya, over a decade. The company was called Mawezi. It's Swahili for moonlight. Looks like a solar lights company. It's actually a last mile distribution company. We went from zero to serving 60,000 families in and around Lake Victoria in terms of basic needs, solar systems, solar agri-tech, a range of things. Profitable business, highest ever sales were in August 2020. That was $300,000. We've taken that model. Over 3 years, we've put it into the Amazon with one of the large Brazilian sanitation companies, okay, with a very specific need. They need the ability for a last mile distributor to service last mile communities with a for-profit model in terms of their sanitation needs. So that's happened. A model baked, developed for a decade in Africa, translated to Latin America. Great success story, right? Really happy with that. And the sting in the tail. The African business, about a month ago, we put into administration. Okay, so the cautionary tale is this. We bootstrapped a model, myself and the co-founder, Mike Sherry, in 2012. We went through all the entrepreneurial scars of trying to raise capital, not from the commercial banks, not from the international banks. The MDBs are too expensive, too slow. So we went and raised private capital to develop a bootstrap business. As I say, we went from 0 to 60,000 families, 30% fishing community, 70% farmers, and it was a for-profit business. Great model. Come to August 2020, and our debt provider, high net worth out of Hong Kong, withdrew the facility overnight from a profitable business, partly because of COVID, but because his other portfolio companies were struggling. Ours was the jewel in the crown. We had the debt removed. It took us 8 months to replace the debt, which was great. But by that time, we had an 8-month hiatus in terms of sales to the community. We kept the business going for 2 years. Everybody on the ground, the impact community, and it's partly COVID, partly the supply chain, partly the costs going through the roof in terms of import, export. And subsequently, we've had to close that business. It was a good, healthy business. So what is my takeaway from that? And it's not a doom and gloom story. It's just entrepreneurial punishment. A decade, getting a cracking business up and running. What we found over the decade was, unless you are one of those really hot, sexy companies, one of the 10% where 85% of capital is going to, people will not speak to you. They will not move quickly. And that is killing, I think, really good entrepreneurial businesses in East Africa and in Kenya. Our other experience was that in terms of, you can have conversations with international banks at Davos, and their board members would say, that's a fantastic model, we'll sort you out with capital. By the time you get it down to the local office, they want 38% in terms of interest, and they want the deeds on your house in the UK, right? So look, maybe this is a little bit of a dated model. What I'm hearing from today's panel is a really, really positive dynamic and the ecosystem coming into play. But I would go back to the colleague who presented before and made the point about 80% of the capital going to 10% of the companies. I think there are a lot of jewels in the crown there which simply do not get a say if they haven't got the buzz, if they're not seen as sexy, if the international impact crowd is not going to them, if the NDBs are not going to them. So let me finish on this. You've got a 10-year success story exported to Latin America with one of the largest Brazilian sanitation companies, backed by one of the world's largest infrastructure backers, which is now in place, and we're going to start rolling it out across different Brazilian provinces. I would hope that we can bring the model back to Africa. So fundamentally, great African story, killed by COVID, killed by a lack of speed in terms of backing entrepreneurs. It's gone to Brazil. I'd hope we can bring it back in the future. I realize that's really Formula One delivery. Sorry for the technical problems on my side, but there's a positive African story with a sting in the tail. And I think that sting in the tail is a cautionary one, and I think it's still in play now. You've got to be quicker, got to be cheaper, you've got to support the right entrepreneurs. Christian, I'll leave it at that. I hope it made sense. And again, an absolute pleasure to be with you and the Swiss community. And the Kenyan community.
Okay, Paul, that was fantastic. Really a great lesson learned to share with the right people, the National Advisory Board. I hope you can stick around to the Q&A, because I think that might have triggered a lot of curiosity and questions that people want to ask to you. So if you don't mind, Paul, we'll come back to you, and also maybe you can tell a little bit more about what you're doing generally in Kenya, besides this very fascinating case study. Okay, so
thank you.
Yeah, so to have enough time for the Q&A, I'm happy to present to you my colleague from Impact Entrepreneur Magazine, Mr. Raymond Obara, who attended the 10th SANCAL Africa Forum as a journalist. And I think it's important also to get the story from someone from seeing our industry from outside. So Raymond, over to you. Happy to hear what are your key takeaways from this important investment forum.
Thank you very much, Christian. I'm Raymond Ubari from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm also a consultant with Impact Africa Consulting. But more importantly, I think it's good that we share some of the insights that came out of the SANCAP 10th conference, 10th anniversary conference that was held in Nairobi, Kenya. I believe it was one of a kind conference, because initially before that we had the East African Impact Investment Conference, and then on this first and second we had SANCAP, and I believe the insights we'll share with you will be able to be very important, especially with regards to the ecosystem and also the movement of impact investment in Kenya. One of the key highlights of the conference was that, especially looking at Africa in general, basically money is flowing in around 3 countries. That is Africa, that is Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa, and then around 80% of impact investment money, and then the rest share the crumbs. So there's a lot of biasness with regards to those 3 African countries. And there was need also for involvement of other African countries, so that we can see impact that is distributed evenly across Africa, and also lifting people out of poverty. Also, one of the key highlights is that money is flowing to actually male entrepreneurs, and that is one of the things that came out highly. But one of the great things that came out of that conference was that we saw a lot of impact investors. We saw Visa actually established a 1 million fund that was targeted to women. And also we saw other collaborators that were thinking about investing in women. Also, apart from that, this is my own insights. Apart from working with financial sector, especially being a consultant in the impact investment press and ESG, we are seeing a lot of banks, a lot of financial institutions developing products for women. And it is a good thing. And if you looked, I was just looking at insights from the finance sector, especially during COVID, women entrepreneurs did well in terms of returns. And also we are seeing a lot of traction going into finance that are geared towards women business. Also, one of the things that came out of that conference is that there's really lack of education and also profiling among entrepreneurs who are involved in impact, because mostly they are just entrepreneurs. But if you look at their value chain, they are really impacting people, but they are not coming out, profiling themselves, position themselves as impact entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of awareness that is lacking. So capacity building, creation of awareness is very important. We can see we can see a lot of traction, especially from entrepreneurs, and also they can position themselves so that they can position themselves to investors, and the investments will flow in. Also, measurement was a challenge, especially in terms of impact investment. There is a dearth of measurement tools and strategies with regards to impact investment, and that is basically a challenge, especially to investors. How do we measure the impact that we are making? So that is, I think also in terms of the impact ecosystem, it's about trying that we develop very tools and toolkits that can be able to be utilized by entrepreneurs so that they can be able to be adopted and also showcase impact, because impact is very important. And also the skills and capacities of impacted entrepreneurs, they can be able to learn, especially from the global north and global south. Those platforms, advocacy platforms that David was talking about in the first juncture is very important going forward. Also, one of the things that we are seeing is that we are seeing a lot of traction. Right now, we have a new government in Kenya, and it's really focusing on green investment. So there's a lot of traction, there's a lot of conversation around that end, and also regulation that is being poised with regards to carbon credits. So that is one of the areas that we believe this new government is keen on enhancing, especially with regards to adaptation funding and also green finance that can flow into the country. And I think that is quite a highlight of the SACAP conference. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much, Raymond. So I don't be. So we'll move on to the second part, which is the Q&A. But before we open up to the floor for all of the participants, we have a number of African NABIIs and task forces present. I don't know if there's anyone from the Tanzanian task force who would want to ask questions to our panelists before we open up the floor. We also have, I think, Amit from Mauritius, Yakuba from Burkina Faso. If any of you would want to ask some questions before we open up, please go ahead.
Maybe
hi, Christian.
So this is Kiko from Tanzania. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, go ahead, Kiko.
Yeah, sure. So mine is not a question. I just wanted to say what Paul shared. Actually, it was really relatable on the experience that we have from our side. So, like, those are experiences from Kenya, but from Tanzania also we have cases like those. In some, right now we say they are becoming a success story, but most of those cases are still a struggle. So I was really happy to hear what he shared.
Okay. Okay, let me just, I cannot see if there's anyone that has any question. Please introduce yourself briefly and ask the question concisely so we can allow as many people to ask questions as possible. Maybe before, I just have a questions to Arif. I mean, basically 4 years ago, the Global Steering Group, they came from London down to Nairobi to have a conversation with many of the stakeholders that are now part of the task force. could you maybe explain to us, also giving the similarity there is between Nairobi and Geneva, which are both financial centers that are maybe more advanced than many of the other capitals on the African continent. What has stalled the process? That some of the other task forces that will be listening to this event can learn from that in terms of to kind of speed up the process? What have been your major challenges in terms of bringing all of these fantastic associations together that are now part of the task force? And when do you see yourself submitting your official application to join the global steering group? I don't know if Arif is still with us.
Oh, sorry, Christian, are you addressing the question to me? This is Arif.
Yes, to you, Arif. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, no, thanks. Can you repeat the question, because the way you pronounce my name, I thought you were referring to somebody else.
Sorry about the pronunciation, Arif.
No worries, no worries.
Basically, what I'm alluding to is the fact that the process, since there are now around 10 African countries that have launched a task force, and it can take different, the time it takes to go from the task force to be an officially recognized NAB can be a very long process. So what have been some of your major challenges? I mean, you have, I think, probably the most fantastic task force that I've seen on the African continent, but it has taken some time. So what will be some of your recommendations that you can share with some of the other task forces that will be listening to this event in terms of helping them speed up the process? Because we need more NABs on the continent so we can address the issues that some of the speakers said, that most of the impact capital is concentrated in Nigeria, in South Africa and Kenya, so it can also come out to the other African countries.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think one of the lessons, of course, is to ensure you have all the right people in the room. You've got a good sense of the movers and shakers of the financial ecosystem, and that you're able to get the leadership excited, not working just at technical levels, but at governance levels as well. I think the other big lesson for us has been, the approach we've taken is to say that it's a bit like the Nike brand advertisement, just do it. So sometimes there comes a time when you shoot the engineers and start production. You have to make sure you don't get stuck in analysis paralysis, and you're actually making things happen. So I think the approach we've taken is, whilst we wait to officially become a NAB and be recognized by GSG and all of that process, things are happening, things are moving. And our slogan has been, the train has left the station, the impact train has left the station, things are moving along. I think success breeds success. So as you see deal flow, as you see a critical mass of things happening, as you see this kind of impact ecosystem established much more, there is no doubt that additional partnerships, credibility, financing, deal flow will continue to happen. But I think it's important not to wait for perfection to stand in the way of getting things going. And I think that's been a really important lesson for us. So for us, it's more of a ground up, bottom up, action oriented approach, rather than dotting all your I's and crossing your T's and waiting for some kind of global credentialing before you can start. And the associations have been very active in and of themselves. A lot of innovative financing instruments have been developed. A lot of interesting things are happening. Many of our members have been put onto very important national committees and councils in investment. So I think that's very important. And I think the other important thing is to really be a global citizen, to be very open to the kinds of forums that we have here, to see how we can also learn and leverage from lessons, tips and traps from other countries, so that we can shorten our learning curve as well. So I'd stop there, but these are a couple of lessons. And the last thing, of course, is oftentimes trying to bring collaborations to work for the love of God, philanthropy and compassion only goes so far. Really identify the enlightened self-interest of all parties and look for the win-win. Try and incentivize people so that There is a win-win, whether you're global, you're local, you're regional, but find those win-win opportunities. And as I said, give everyone visibility, give everyone the credit. Don't just look for branding on your own. And that way you bring convergence. Thank you.
Thank you, Arif. Let me just lump two questions together to you, Paul, since you alluded to the fact that you are meeting bankers in Davos. So I know that you have, as you have mentioned, you have trained more than 1,000 bankers in environmental and social risk. So the first question is, have you trained any of the Kenyan bankers? And what have been some of the more measurable outcomes of the training in Kenya? And also, you have been a member of the board of the UN Principles of Responsible Investment that has more than 4,000 investors representing 100 trillion US dollars. Are any of these investors present in Nairobi? And if that's the case, why do you still think that they are not persuadable to address this issue of the what you can call the 2080 divide or 90-10 divide that we have been hearing from several speakers today?
Christian, again, I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Look, I'll just be very brief. The training reference was, I was a UN official for 12 years, from 2000 to 2012. I headed the UNEP Finance Initiative, and we started what was called the ESRA course, which was Environmental Social Risk Analysis training in 2002. So I think between then and 2022, we must be well over 5,000-6,000. But that was my team at UNEP-FI. I left the UN in 2012. I think in terms of the Kenyan banking question, look, I think Kenya, it's already happening. But in terms of actually grabbing the mantle of being the sustainable finance, responsible investment heart of Africa, full stop, right? Traditionally it was Cape Town, it was Johannesburg. I think you sit on the very cusp of that. But I think the 10 big commercial Kenyan banks have to really shake themselves and wake up and see the opportunity, right? When, you can have conversations, but in terms of sustainability, ESG, impact being actually in the DNA of the Kenyan finance sector and the big commercial banks, it's just not there yet. They're playing around the edges, and they potentially miss the opportunity of a lifetime to establish a hub that will send messages across the whole continent, period. Okay. I know I sound a bit critical. I'm not. I know it's hard to get it done, but Kenya must not miss this opportunity. And when you finally get your sovereign wealth fund, it should be the green sustainability star of the whole Pan-African continent. That's I'm being a bit of an advocate as well. In terms of the gap between institutional investors and the figures around the UN PRI, which again was formed, created and launched by my team at UNEP-FI in 2000 and launched for Kofi Annan in 2006 at the New York Stock Exchange, it's now 5,000 institutions and $120 trillion. So you think everything was solved? No. The gap between the major asset owners, the asset managers, and the impact community on the ground is still huge, right? The trickle of institutional funds into proper impact at scale, I think, is a crime. I think it's beginning to change. I think that both sides of the party, the institutional investors, the big players in the PRI, and the impact community itself, have got to get far more comfortable with each other. And part of that is about scale and replicability. So the impact story is not being told effectively to the world's largest institutional investors, simply not. And the institutional investors always look for massive scale because that's where their economics make sense. I think the gap has got to close. And again, I hope I don't sound too critical, but look, I woke up one morning in 1991 when I had my first business in Bangkok, and it was called the Environmental Business Group. And I thought, sustainability is all good and well, but unless you can get finance and capital to move at massive scale, trillions, not billions, sustainable development will not happen. And that's been my mission for the last 30 plus years through the UN, through different businesses, et cetera, et cetera. So my key point here is Kenya, East Africa, has an opportunity to become the sustainability finance heart of Africa, period. It won't be there forever. You need to absolutely mobilize that community, and the commercial banks should be at the heart of it, not slow Joe and holding back. Feed those entrepreneurs, feed the businesses. Sorry for going on. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think with Mr. Neky's able leadership, I'm sure that, and the support of the UN system, that Kenya will move in that direction to become the sustainable finance hub of Africa. Actually, I wanted to ask a question related to that to you, Karnika. Um, since Intellecap is part of the...
Christian, I'm afraid she sent a message. She's just had to drop off on the chat. So unfortunately, she's left us.
Okay, I wanted to highlight the fact that the Akisha group, they are... what I find very interesting with regard to what Paul he just mentioned is that they specifically invest in only tier 2 and tier 3 cities in rural areas rather than the main urban areas where the existing ecosystem exists. So I wanted really have her to talk and relate that to what Paul said about Kisumu. But maybe we can do that another time. Okay, I have more questions, but I will allow the audience also to raise questions to the excellent speakers we have today. So any questions from the floor?
Purity has put in a question in the chat. And Purity, I don't know if you want to read it out or if you want me to. But okay, so one of the issues being encountered in the measurement metrics to support the impact business cases is the lack of standardization to enable comparison and benchmarking. What are the solutions you have encountered, if any? So I'm not sure who is the best to answer on that one, but maybe Arif again. You're providing excellent replies here, I think.
I'm happy to defer to all our technical experts here. I think you heard my voice enough this evening.
Curtis, you want to give it a try?
Yes. Yeah, sure. So generally on impact investment, I know every institution, they have their own in-house matrices to do so, but over time, the whole impact investment space, we have had certain matrices that have been overlapping over and over. For instance, if it's just tracking, if it's on renewable energy, on the CO2 sequestered or reduced, if it's on agriculture, things on improvement of incomes, the number of farmers, smallholder farmers that you're working with, and the incomes that have been improved. So there are certain matrices that are cross-cutting, such that it doesn't matter who you're working with. You know for a fact that certain things will definitely come to the fore. So yes, the industry has moved, and we are more or less agreed on what are the things that will need to be measured. So if you go across, despite the different templates, the overall matrices will more or less be similar.
Okay, thank you, Curtis. Kiko, you also have a question? And then Amne, maybe we take Amne first.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, go ahead, Kiko. Go ahead.
All right, thank you, Christian. So my question was basically with the balancing between having synergies and coordinated effort towards impact investing, especially when it comes to activities in rural areas and urban centers, where most of these activities are concentrated, and there is more collaboration in these urban centers because a lot of actors actually have activities there as compared to rural areas. So my question was, what is your opinion on, with regard to balancing, like having synergies, because it's very important in building this ecosystem to not to have not to spread, especially with the limited resources, not to spread ourselves too thin, trying to be everywhere and making sure that these rural areas are not being left behind. How would you suggest on balancing that? Like you have to have activities in the rural areas, in those peripheral areas where there are very little activities happening, but also not to spread yourself too thin by with the limited resources. I hope my question is clear there.
Who are you addressing the question to, Kiko? Any the whole panel or in one specifically?
If Paul could address that, would be great. But otherwise, in the panel, to be fine.
Hi, rather embarrassingly, I'm going to ask you just give me the headline, ask on the question, because I lost sound for a second. What's the nub of the question, and I will try and answer.
Yeah, so the question is, for instance, in Tanzania, most of our activities are happening in Dar es Salaam. And in Dar es Salaam, so there is a lot of synergies because most of players are there. So it's easy to build successful activities in Dar es Salaam than in rural areas. So my question basically was like, how do you make sure like you get to, in the urban areas? But how do you make sure you also don't leave behind the rural areas without losing the opportunity to build synergies and collaboration?
Look, two things, and it's a great question. I think the type of network that's developing in Kenya that the colleague Mr. Neky described, and forgive me for pronunciation, that type of ecosystem evolving, it's a hub and spoke. The hub is always going to be the capitals, the major cities, but those spokes of identifying really hungry, interested entrepreneurs and dynamic young bankers who get the impact component and incorporating them into the ecosystem is absolutely key. So that the advocacy, the training, the outreach, that type of network that we're seeing in Kenya evolve, and not to always focus in and around the capital. It is the Kisumus, it is the secondary and tertiary cities, and without doing that ecosystem doesn't evolve. Our experience in the East African sense is there's some really hungry, bright, smart entrepreneurs who in the rural areas, they're there, but they can be forgotten. But if once they're pulled in, it brings an energy of its own. I know that's a generic answer, but it's about consistently reaching out and building that ecosystem and making people excited about the opportunities. And it is about speed to market in terms of capital for good entrepreneurs.
Okay, great. Amne, did you have a question? No? Okay, feel free to step in. We have 5 minutes left because of the time difference. It's already very late in Nairobi. So let me just quickly raise a question to you, Raymond. So the Sandkelp is focusing on what they call the 3 billion that has been left behind from the global economic growth. Who are they in Kenya? And also, what kind of innovators impress you the most at this year's edition of the Sandkelp in terms of either product or services addressing some of the SDG challenges in Kenya? And who are there any of these amazing impact investors or social entrepreneurs that you'll be featuring in your articles that covers that event? If you can give us a little teaser for the upcoming articles that you're writing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christian. I think one of the there were basically three entrepreneurs that were featured in that conference, and it was quite interesting because one of the entrepreneurs basically is in the food systems value chain, because as a country, basically infrastructure is a challenge. So connecting farmers with the market is very important. And the entrepreneur that was featured is called Legendary Foods, is providing a value chain integration solution so that farmers down at the village, basically smallholder farmers, and like 80% of smallholder farmers are women. So imagine impacting women, and also women contribute more to the family, and giving them access to the market in the right time so that they can sell their foods in the right prices. So it's very important that those kinds of entrepreneurs are supported. Also, another one is called VetSac Limited, which also has a very enterprising system where they provide services in a very categorized way, so that you can be able to choose services in accordance with the value of your money. And also one entrepreneur also is called Medical Laboratory. One of the things also that I'll be focusing on, especially in my article, is that the impact in investment in an ecosystem in Kenya, it's quite broad, but we are seeing a lot of players working in silos, and that means that also the ecosystem is a player of it's actually the players are few and they know each other. So there is need for a lot of education coming from the government, coming from the entrepreneurs themselves, and also visibility. It's very important that entrepreneurs know where there is finance and the finance that can be able to work with them. It's very important that also as investors finance, they also provide some level of education, some level of capacity building, some level of technical assistance. Because at the end of the day, markets are different, how entrepreneurs think are different. So working with the entrepreneurs through the journey is very important, especially for impact and even scaling going forward. Also, with regards to impact investing, we are also seeing a lot of head starts coming from the private sector. So I believe Kenya Private Sector Alliance also is thinking about that space, because there's a lot of inroads coming from East African Venture Philanthropy Alliance, who they are working very heavily in terms of developing platform for pitches. So there's a lot of activities, but the silos and parties working basically in darkness, then it means that there's much that people are not knowing and they can be able to unlock. So I believe it's very important, even as people are working, we also work with the government very closely, with the county governments, with the levels of government, so that we can be able to unlock all this potential that is being felt in the ecosystem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We have Dr. Yakuba Ouedraogo. He's from Burkina Faso, heading the task force, and I think Burkina Faso is probably among those 3 billion inhabitants on this planet who have not really benefited a lot from globalization the way we have seen it in the last 20 plus years. Yakuba, I'll give you the last opportunity to ask a question before I close the event. If there's I know there's not a lot of similarities between Ouagadougou and Nairobi, but from some of the questions raised by Kiko, maybe there's some issues that you would want to raise from your side.
Hi, thank you very much, Christian, for organizing this very interesting, very insightful session. And thank you also to all the speakers for the insights. Mr. Neky, Mr. Paul, I enjoy very much listening your comments and your insights you have provided on new NABIIs. We are a very small NAB, started last year, so we are working about on establishing a NAB. So we do really appreciate attending this kind of session to learn from establishing NAB. So thank you so much. I don't have a specific question. Thank you so much, Christian, for inviting us to attend this fantastic session. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Yakuba. I think an interesting time. So we have had this very interesting and promising conversation, but of course, the conversation does not end here, since all the participants who have signed up to the Entnest platform, you can continue to engage with the speakers, especially the NAB Kenya Task Force members, as represented by Mr. Arif Neky and Mrs. Karnika Yadav. So let me just conclude quickly. The next event will showcase 4 to 5 of Kenya's leading economic support organizations as seen through the lens of impact investment and social entrepreneurship. And we hope that our friends at the NAB Kenya Task Force would kindly recommend a few that we can invite for the next event, which will take place the 30th of March. Next month, we are very excited to announce that we will be launching a new debate series to celebrate the 200 years of free speech, which will take place in the historical city of Coupé, which is 16 kilometers outside of Geneva. This is where the so-called Coupe group, led by Madame de Stael, held their think tank meetings to debate philosophical and political questions in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. And so we basically aim to use this historical platform to launch a series of debates similar to the Monk debates at the University of Toronto or the Oxford Union style event, where 6 to 8 leaders, thinkers, and influencers of international Geneva's ecosystem will debate various themes related to impact investing. And the first event will start on the 25th of April, and that will be a debate on what makes Geneva unique as a sustainable finance and impact investing laboratory compared to other financial centers, for example, compared to Nairobi's financial center. And finally, we hope to cover Ethiopia and then in the next quarter, we will move on for the 6th edition of our series, which will be focusing on Uganda. And then in the last quarter of the year, we will be present at the Building Bridges event, hopefully with some of the NABIIs, in the sense that we are together with the UN International Trade Center. We want to set up an Africa village to showcase some of the amazing work that is happening on the African continent, including through the work of ITC, but also, if possible, through the support of the work that's being done by the African NABIIs. That will be in Geneva. And then in November, Swiss Impact Investing Association, we will be resuming our SIA Impact Summit in Zug, in the German-speaking part of Switzerland. The last 2 years we organized this event online, but now we're going back after the COVID to have an in-person event. So we also hope to see some of you there. And finally, we hope to cover Ethiopia after the GIN in Copenhagen and the Global Steering Group event in Malaga. All of these events takes place in October. So very much look forward to seeing some of you there in person. So if you want to reach out to me and the Swiss Impact Investing Association, you have my contact details here. Again, as I said, we can be contacted both myself as well as Johan from Entnest through the Entnest platform. And with these words, I would like to thank you all for your attention, and very much looking forward to seeing some of you again in 2 weeks' time when we organize our next webinar. Thank you so much for your attention and for your support in organizing this event. And have a nice evening.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christian. This was great.
Thank you.